Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. My name is Clayton Hyam, presiding member for the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel meeting number 45. This afternoon I have with me Karen Hyde, who's the deputy presiding member, Eugene Coltaz, who's a specialist member, and councillors Cridland and Wall from the City of South Perth. I declare the meeting open at 1:06 p.m. and acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with the regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. Panel members may from time to time refer to technical devices throughout the meeting, looking for information or additional information. We have no apologies or no members on leave of absence, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Moving to part B on the agenda, I'm just looking for a declaration of due consideration. All members familiar with the material before us today? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Just noting also there was an R13 direction response published on the 15th of November 2024. Disclosures of interest. I have one from Councillor Wall, an impartiality interest, in that she was contacted by and attended on-site where she was met by several neighbours to the proposed development. None of the persons are known to her personally. So it is an impartiality interest. Any other declarations of interest or disclosures of interest? No. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to the item at Park Street, Como. Just noting that there was a written submission from Brad Katnich, published on the DAP website. And also to remind you that the presentations are limited to 3 minutes. We've read your material, so I think you need to stick to the salient points that you need to get us to understand from your point of view. So we'll move to presentations, and the minute secretary there, or governance person there, will be timing it. So when you hear the timer go, if you could then please wind up your presentation. Anna Kirk, it's the first one.
Good afternoon, panel members. My name is Anna Kirk. This is my second deputation. There's nothing much new for us in this proposal. There are superficial amendments which fail for us to adequately address the community's core issues, or we believe the panel directive from the last DAP. So we question what exactly is the purpose of community consultation if concerns are not seriously addressed by the city. It really feels like this is a done deal, and it can be shoehorned in without the requirement to address the very real gaps as part of the inherent design. To reiterate, this proposal overstuffs this site and is the root cause of all the consequential issues. The site is too small and in the wrong location to properly accommodate the proposal, and is at odds with 3.2 and 3.3 of the WA Planning Commission's draft childcare premises position statement. Key points being, 1, to minimise the impact a childcare centre has on its surrounds, in particular on the amenity of the existing residential areas, and 2, the site should be in a location of sufficient size and dimension to accommodate the development without affecting the amenity of the area. In our view, neither of those guidelines have been met. The city has provided no compelling reason, modelling or statistics to substantiate the urgent need to repurpose this block right now and approve an operation with too many issues and concessions, especially given 3 recent approvals for 216 new childcare places in the last 6 months and good local availability. We do not believe the city appreciates the reality of addressing inherent design flaws through management plans by busy childcare workers under pressure in an operational environment, and who exactly is going to independently monitor compliance, who is the arbitrator, and what are the penalties of non-compliance. Is it the resident's job to babysit this childcare centre operation? I'll skip through some of the other things I was going to say because I can see from my own timing where I'm up to. We're working on parking volumes or no parking volumes from the city, which are now a quarter of a century old. And we've got huge things happening in this area till 2050. So are we seriously going to have proposals approved on perhaps half a century old statistics? So in short, we request that the panel members critically consider this proposal as though they or any of their family and friends were any of the residents severely impacted, the most serious being at the rear on Baldwin and each side on 42 and 46 Bark Street. If approved, we request that the panel considers and discretionarily directs the city to assign a dedicated CCO, a City Conditions of Operations Manager, to address ongoing operational issues that will most definitely arise and to assign the appropriate operational penalties. Also to utilise the nominal parking shortfall penalty to assign to using in the local street vicinity and undertake a proper traffic assessment to support the proper evaluation of future approvals under the city's strategic activity centre plan. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Are there questions of panel members? No.
No.
Thank you very much.
Brian and Melva, apparently there's an illness going on right now.
Is that?
Brian and Melva, there's a serious issue going on with one of them at the moment.
Oh,
Illness,
okay.
so they won't be able to make it.
All right. So what we'll do, we'll note that as a take it as a written submission.
Yeah. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you very much. Casey Napier.
Hi everyone, I'm on the screen. I hope you can hear and see okay.
Yes, thanks, Casey.
Okay. Hi, I'm Casey. Firstly, I'd just like to say that upon reading the latest Responsible Authority report on this proposed development, I was quite disappointed to see that very little had changed, and it feels very much like the community's concerns have been disregarded again. As previously presented at the 10th of October DAP meeting, my property is heavily impacted by overshadowing, and despite the referral to review overshadowing impacts, the council notes marginal reduction in overshadowing has occurred since plans were reviewed. 55% overshadowing of the block and 78% of the house footprint still exceeds the R code, and I don't feel a proper review was ever done. Why is it okay for my property to wear the impacts of overshadowing from this development when there are possible other solutions still available? My previous comments on the overshadowing and the R code considerations therefore still stand. There are north-facing windows which will be impacted, and regardless of what a desktop review reports, all my windows are relevant. Please stop finding reasons for why north-facing, light-emitting windows are not important here. The outdoor spaces are usable, and solar options for my home would be lovely, but obviously if this progresses, this wouldn't be an option for my home. How these are being dismissed so easily in the RAR is quite unfathomable to me. Furthermore, I see that point 9 in the direction for further services document also mimics these views. Not only are there solar access issues, I still don't understand how there are varying views on acoustic modelling from different experts on the same proposal. And as far as I can tell, this doesn't appear to be revised in the documents of the latest agenda. It appears also that the fence line along my property won't be masonry but slim wall, which starts from my back fence line. What is the justification for this? And why would 46 Park Street not be considered for masonry wall too? Like I've said before, all the action for drop-offs, pickups, mechanical services, waste management will all be happening metres from my front door. All I can say is that I cannot support this proposed development. And if the developer wishes to fit into the community and have a good rapport with the neighbours, as I recall this being mentioned in the previous meeting, I don't think this is the way to go about it. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm not against childcare services for the community, but the scale and location of this proposal is unreasonable. I also wonder how operational aspects are going to be managed for compliance. That's a short version of my presentation today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Casey. Other questions of Casey from panel members?
No.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, guys.
We'll move on to Grant Pusey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to speak to you all. I won't reiterate too much from my last presentation, but here's what we've established so far. We've established that there is not enough parking in the proposed development. Despite the best efforts of the developer to squeeze in as much as possible, the property is simply too small. We've established that the acoustics report probably lacked good science, and there has been no reliable modelling done. We've established the phenomenal scale of this building. It towers over the neighbours, creates an unmanageable amount of waste, and is serviced by a road that is regularly reduced to a single lane. We've established that the local residents hold grave fears about the potential traffic caused by the development, but people who live elsewhere, people who have zero data, assure us that everything will be okay. The truth is that none of the issues raised by the community have been adequately addressed. They've been nothing more than noted in the hopes that if this was approved, the developer and the city are then free to carry on between themselves, free from real oversight. It's important to note that this year already, the panel has approved 3 childcare centres for the city of South Perth, 2 of which are in Como as well. So today, I'm going to refer to the guiding principles for the exercise of discretion, a framework that I'm sure you're aware of. The first principle discusses the economic and community need for any development, but I'm yet to hear any. In the city's report and the minutes of our last meeting, it appears that no one has justified an economic, community, or any need for this development at all, let alone one so urgent that a residential block needs to be repurposed. Furthermore, Principle 3 states that there must be clear and logical reasons to depart from the standard. Well, there is no shortage of more suitable mixed use and commercial properties in the local area. And as I've already mentioned, we've got to stack more childcare placements on the way. So if anything, there appears to be a clear and logical reason to keep the block for housing and for this application to be refused. The community is here today because we've all been ignored by the city. Principle 4 of the guidelines states that our input has a legitimate role in the planning process. In fact, it specifically stands against decision makers who dismiss, ignore, or simply note the submissions received. In my opinion, this is precisely how things have been handled by the city. And so we're here today to ask you not to let this development proceed. And finally, Principle 5 discusses the need for genuine and proper consideration. And that's where we leave it to you, the panel members. We are relying on you to look beyond the glossy images, the hand waving and the potential political points, and to see that this development is simply unnecessary and will be damaging to the street. If the developer wants to add to a saturated childcare sector, that's fine, but discretionary approval should not be used for this purpose. They can build somewhere else, and I think you know that. The question is, do you have the courage to apply the brakes? Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Other questions of Grant from panel members? No. All right. Thank you very much. Move on to Perry Kalipidis.
It's got a bit of hay fever. Is that right? My wife just speaks.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, panel members. My name is Rosalind Philippidis. I'm an enrolled nurse at Hollywood Private Hospital. I'm going to be speaking on my husband's point of view. My wife, Rosalind, and I live at the immediate rear fence line of the proposed childcare centre development on Baldwin Street. Our northeast back fence line adjoins the property at the rear southeast fence line. We do acknowledge the owner of the proposed childcare centre, Mr. Rory Hindle, made the effort to personally attend our property at 13 Baldwin Street, as well as our neighbour's property at 11 Baldwin Street, at our personal request to himself and the developer in the lobby after the JDAP meeting on the 10th of October to inspect and understand the impact. However, the practical reality is that the building high masonry walls, putting in another minor roof design diagonal on the southeast roof line, and a marginal play setback will in no way address the main issues. My wife, Rosalind, being myself, as well as being a mother of our 10-year-old child, is an essential shift worker, enrolled nurse. She works various shifts, often high care and back to back, and clearly has reason and expectation to sleep during the day as needed to be able to fulfill her role as a community service, and family obligations ensure she is up to physical and mental scratch to look after patients. Clearly, our property, with our bedroom backed up against the fence line of a childcare centre of these proportions, with the daily noise of children playing outside, compromises her ability to sleep during the day. We note that in our on-site verbal discussion with Mr. Rory Hindle, he verbally committed to taking on the full cost of building the walls. Should this proposal be approved, we seek this to be a formal condition of approval. During the construction phase, we are extremely concerned about our property's exposure to security and privacy implications. Demolition of the existing 44 Park Street property, removal of 44 Park Street trees, and depending on what happens with the fences, has the potential for easy, undesirable criminal access into our backyard, also into number 11 Baldwin Street and the adjoining properties at 42 and 46 Park Street. The area has a well-known crime element, and in fact, one of the panel members is directly involved with working party on this topic. We request, as a condition of any approval, that appropriate building lockup and security fencing and the construction security cameras are installed to protect impacting property areas during construction. We are for community progress. However, we are against the loss of our right to quiet enjoyment.
Thank you, Rosie. Are there questions? Thank you very much. Carolyn Knight.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Phil Knight, and my wife and I live at 11 Baldwin Street, the property adjoining this proposed development to the east, and we are vehemently opposed to it. Our main bedroom is only 1.5 metres from the eastern boundary fence, and the constant daily noise from the development, should it proceed, will impact significantly upon our amenity, use of our outdoor living spaces, and also exacerbate my wife's cardiac health issues. I'd like to clarify a point made in submission by Tall Trees and also Apex Planning. My neighbour did arrange a meeting with Mr. Hindle, which we were part of. Our intention was to show Mr. Hindle the reality of our quiet residence and the proximity of our main bedroom to the fence boundary. No agreements were made, and our fundamental concerns about the development were not resolved. It is important to us that this meeting is not misrepresented. The Regulation 13(1) comments provided by the city make for interesting reading. Inadequate parking issues are highlighted and have been constantly referenced by Park Street residents. For us, a damning statement is that, quote, the proposed hours of operation commencing from 6:30 a.m. is considered to result in an undue impact on nearby residential properties and would be inconsistent with the expected level of amenity for a residential zone. We totally agree and have made this point on several occasions. Similarly, the statement that, quote, the proposed landscape plan lacks detail to clearly demonstrate how the children's play areas will be designed to minimise noise impacts and avoid encroaching on privacy of neighbouring properties, etc. We totally agree with this statement, and we have raised this also before. As an identified noise-sensitive property, there is nobody here today that can say we will not be severely impacted by the accumulated noise of 2 outdoor play areas with around 70 children playing outside at any one time, not including the under 2-year-olds who also make noise. Should this development proceed, to ensure our best interests are represented, it is requested that we are included in the city's processes, namely, 1, to consider the landscape plans and associated setbacks and buffers are acceptable including the location of play structures prior to any final decision being made. 2, to have input into the noise management plan to be submitted for approval by the city prior to building permit approval. And 3, the consultation process and the preparation of the dilapidation report, as we will be affected by demolition as outlined in our written submission. Finally, as we have stated previously, there are too many design faults and deficiencies given the scale of this proposed development. The 9 points raised in the Regulation 13.1 information clearly validates the arguments put forward in submissions against its approval. Conditions can't be relied on to fix fundamental flaws for an oversized commercial childcare premises in the middle of a residential street. Put simply, what is being proposed is too big for the block, nothing fits, and too many compromises being made to the detriment of existing local residents. Thank you, panel, for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you, Phil. Other questions from panel members? No? No, thank you very much. Richard Lowe.
Good afternoon, panel, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you again. In my first presentation, I focused on the impact of the development on general carrying capacity of the local road network, and in particular on Park Street. I want to focus now on, and this incidentally is the property we're talking about. You can get an idea of the amount of off-street, of street parking which takes place in this area. I want to focus today on the particular hours, the peak hours, where the transport impact statement says that only 36% of the trips will be made. That means that something like 74% of all the trips to drop off children and pick them up are going to be made during off-peak hours. That seemed so counterintuitive to me that I wondered whether there could be an error in the calculation, that the factor of 2, which is a sort of factor that can crop up in these things. And if it was 72%, the figures look quite reasonable. 120 something for evening pickup, 117 in the morning, and 95 trips during the off-peak time. That seems to me much more reasonable as an assessment. Now, the problem with it is, though, that the guidelines say that over 100 trips during peak hour raises an issue which requires, more detailed assessment. Previously, under the previous calculations, it was said that these are they're somewhere between mild and moderate, and therefore they don't need to be looked at. I'm saying that the numbers are such that they do need to be looked at, and certainly it calls into question the statement that there would be only less than moderate impact during those peak hours. I just want to come back briefly to the more general issue. If we could, can I just change this? This is a picture looking north. The cars on the right are outside the property, 44 Park Street. The car on the left of them has got its brake lights on because it's in transit and it's had to stop to allow the oncoming trucks to pass, demonstrating that indeed Park Street does become, in this particular area, does become a one-lane road. And the last picture that I have, this is now looking south. Again, the property is on the left. You can see the cars on the street are in that area, and you can see a train of 3 different cars, all one passing single file past that area. That concludes my statement.
Thank you, Richard. Other questions of Richard? No, thank you very much. Move on to Tetsuya Kawahara.
Good afternoon, panel members. Thank you for the opportunity to express my concern with the potential childcare premise at 44 Park Street. I want to first say that I am not against the building childcare service, but I would like to emphasize that location is inappropriate for a center with 86 children, because this is a quiet residential area in the middle of blocks, and the street is insufficient for a number of reasons. There are limited parking space for dropping off and picking up, and making worse the existing traffic issue on Park Street. Noise issue for local and possible privacy invasion for urban residents. As a concerned resident, I originally collected several signatures from a submit the petition to the city of South Perth, which they have included in their report. While walking the street, my partner and I had a lot of local voice objecting to the commercial childcare development. We visited many houses on the Park Street and Baldwin Street and collected over 71 signatures in a couple of days. It was clear that vast majority of the both Park Street and Baldwin Street area are against this application. On behalf of people who signed the petitions, I have a mission to address the inappropriateness of the large childcare center at this location. I have 71 signatures on my back, and the residents have given me the courage to presenting today. As you see me now, this live stream public speaking is my first experience, and I'm stage fright at the moment. But I'm presenting because I'm here for the 71 signatures. And our petition is a clear message from a local residents against the commercial facility in a residential area. And I think it neglected the local community if application is approved, even if application proceeds adhere to the guideline and the regulations. Local voice, including 71 signatures, are ignored if application is approved. Thank you for your consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Tetsuo. Other questions of Tetsuo? No, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on now to the applicants. I'm going to let both Rory and Alessandro do their presentation, and then we'll go to questions of the applicants after that. Thank you.
Dear presiding member and Metro Inner DAP members, my name is Rory and I'm one of the owners of Tall Tree Early Learning. As previously mentioned at the original DAP meeting, Tall Tree Early Learning is a local, family-owned and operated company, having serviced the families of various Perth communities for the last 27 years. We pride ourselves in providing the highest quality care and holistic development opportunities for all of our children, including access to in-house health and wellbeing programs, the highest quality dietitian designed meals, STEM and arts programs, school readiness programs, and much, much more. We are the owners of the subject property and will also be the operators of the facility. We operate numerous early learning facilities in local residential areas and are experienced in ensuring acoustic recommendations are upheld and management plans are adhered to. I've personally been involved in the formulation of the proposal and management plans to ensure these are achievable, allowing the centre to operate harmoniously with neighbours. We've done all that we can to ensure this development complies and reduces any potential impact to neighbours. As Rosalind mentioned, I personally met with Parry, Phil and Caroline at their homes to discuss how we can further reduce their impact, agreeing at our own expense to extend the rear fence to Phil and Caroline's home up to 2.4 in an effort to help reduce the impact. We chose this site in Como because there is an extremely large demand now and most definitely in the near future from local parents and families rightly demanding high quality early learning and care services for their children. We know this because our nearest centre to the site is in Manning in the city of South Perth. There are 0 vacancies at our service with over 61 families on our wait list hoping to join. Out of our 124 families we support, 32% of them live in Como and had to seek care outside of Como because they haven't been able to access high quality education and care for their children. Outside of our own direct experience, there's currently 409 childcare places available within the whole suburb. And based off the recent consensus, 716 children aged 0 to 4 within the suburb. And while not every parent will decide to send their children to early learning facilities, it means only 57% of children will actually have the choice in the matter. Further, out of the 409 childcare places, out of the 409 childcare places, only 2 centres, making up 157 places, are deemed to be high quality early learning facilities, according to ASIQA. That's the National Regulatory Body for Early Childhood Services. And after phoning both of these services yesterday, they are also full with wait lists. There is a severe undersupply, and this is even before considering the recent higher density zoning changes or the extra 241 apartments and townhouses currently approved in Como. Whilst it is clear from the select group of residents here today that they are against the development, none of them will utilise our service. None of them are searching for an early learning service where they feel safe to leave their children or are wanting the very best for them. We wouldn't be pursuing this project if we didn't strongly believe in the vast community benefit it will provide for the local children and families of Como, and to refuse this development based on the concerns of a select few group of residents which have been thoroughly examined and resolved through good design, expert assessment, appropriate operational management, and which has been vetted and supported by the local government, will be doing the wider current and future community a terrible disservice. In closing, we hope to become a central part of the Como community for many, many years to come, and I hope the panel recognises the clear community benefit we are aiming to create with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. Alessandro.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, presiding member. Good afternoon, panel members. As you already know, I'm the applicant of the childcare premises proposed at 44 Park Street. In addition to Rory, we also have Janya DeRui, Todd Walpole from Sugar Architects, and also Tim Reynolds from Herring Store Acoustics. They're available to answer questions after our presentations. So this is the second time this proposal is before the MIDAP with a recommendation for approval with appropriate conditions. Following on from the deferral at the previous DAP meeting, the panel now has the benefit of amended plans, which have been adjusted to further reduce shadow impact to the southern neighbour and to provide improved boundary fencing with increased height and confirmed masonry materiality around the playscape, and a better defined playscape on the ground floor to demonstrate how children will be kept away from the site boundaries. There is also a greater understanding of the overshadowing situation to the south of the site, where evidently the shadow impact created by this development is minimal and the design principles are readily achieved. Each criteria of the deferral has been directly addressed, and some of the amendments to the plans were a result of Rory continuing discussions with the neighbours after the last DAP meeting. In particular, it's worth noting that with the higher playscape fence, which was increased to 2.4 metres through discussions with the eastern neighbours, our acoustic consultant, who is here today, has informed us that the noise levels received by the sites adjoining the higher fence have been reduced by up to 4 to 5 decibels, which is a substantial change and brings the noise levels they will receive at the boundary down to the low 40s. The higher fence has a return section on the northern and southern boundaries, so the reduced noise levels will be experienced by all 3 neighbours that adjoin the ground floor playscape. To give you a real-world example, based on a noise comparison chart prepared by the New South Wales government within their Noise Guide for Local Government Guidelines, a quiet suburban area is usually around 45 decibels. It's essential to reiterate, however, that these changes have been made to improve the acoustic situation for the neighbours, and that compliance has been readily achievable all along. So where noise is concerned, the stringent assigned noise levels under the WA noise regulations have always been complied with, and we've only made the situation better. Several appropriate and reasonable conditions have been recommended by the City of South Perth in relation to noise. Each of these conditions is supported by the applicant and the proponent. The conditions collectively relate to operational elements, the preparation of a noise management plan, and the certainty that all noise mitigation measures will be implemented and adhered to for the life of the development. Panel members, this is a proposal for a suitably sized, well-designed and thoroughly considered early learning facility. Childcare premises is a use which is capable of consideration in the residential zone of the city's local planning scheme. The design and layout of the facility has been poked and prodded for over 12 months since the first pre-lodgement design review panel meeting we attended in October 2023. After 3 design review panel meetings, a local government town planning assessment, community consultation process, and deferral by the DAP, the design has been amended at least 5 times. The RAR contains a thorough town planning assessment which addresses the scheme, the local policy framework, and the site-specific considerations, and reiterates support for the proposal. The application includes a raft of expert inputs and assessments to address landscape design, traffic impacts, noise impacts, parking management, waste management. I'm wrapping up. Each of these assessments has been duly considered by the city's experts, and it's been determined that the potential impacts can be addressed through suitable and appropriate conditions of approval, which provide certainty during the operational phase of the centre. What you have before you is a development which has the support of the local government, the support of the design review panel, and which achieves an acceptable level of residential amenity and goes far beyond the minimums. a refusal is not the appropriate decision in this case.
Thank you, Alessandro. Questions of the applicants from panel members? Yes, Karen.
I do. Thank you, Presiding Member. Karen Howard speaking. This is one for, I think, Mr. Hindle. Most of your other facilities offer before school and after school care.
So we have two separate parts of the business, so early learning centres, and then we have after school care programs that operate out of primary schools. So they're not ever combined.
So the children come into the childcare
No.
and then get bused and walked to?
No. So it's only before they start school, they're at the early learning centre, and then the after school programs are once they're at primary school. So they're never operated on site, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. I have a second question, if I may. This might be more for the architects. It's a sloping site. What are there any modifications to ground levels, ground contouring, etc.?
There is towards the rear of the building, so from Park Street down. Oh, yeah, sorry. That's what
So what was your name?
Gianni, Marshak Architect. So typically we're following the contours from Park Street, I guess, down to the current house level. And then from there, we are following the contours down towards the backyard, but there is retaining proposed to the rear of the property, which is on the plans in front of you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then have one other, please, if I may. Sorry to get everybody to stand up, but this is for the acoustic technical consultant. Sorry, what was your name?
Tim Reynolds.
Thank you, Tim. In your assessment, your report, you talk about the source of noise being the children in terms of the noise assessment of the play activity being 1 metre above ground level. Is that based on recontouring the site? And what happens when the children are sort of up on platforms within the play equipment or up at the upper level?
The 1 metre is above the ground level, as will be in the finished site.
Yes.
So it takes account of the changing levels.
Yes.
The 1 metre is the requirement through our Acoustical Society guidelines. So to do it for 1 metre for all age children, from babies to ever, because it was deemed to be just simpler to do that way. When it comes to platforms and things, they're a lot smaller. So we do it in the design and the numbers in groups of 10. So the noise level of 1 child or 2 up at a higher level is a lot less than what it is for the children down below. So it would fall into a different criteria.
Right, and same for the upper level?
For the upper level, for the balcony area, yes, we've included all the children up there as well.
Yes, but what about the platform play equipment?
No, we don't include.
Because that's in the landscape plan.
Yeah. Once again, it's not something we do. It's not something that is critical to determining compliance with the criteria because of the size and the way they're based on the number of children that are on. So it would still comply with those children up in the height on the platform.
Even though you haven't modelled it?
No, because I've done it plenty of times before. I've had these questions before, and it always complies.
All right, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Further questions? I've got one. Sandra, we heard Richard Lugg earlier talking about the traffic figures and the peak hour movements. And can you explain that? So I'm graphing 36% and it's 74, but it's probably 64%.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'll do my best. Obviously, being a town planner and not a traffic engineer, I can express my understanding of it. Yes. So the scope for transport impact statements is set by the WAPC traffic impact assessment guidelines. And the way that they assess the traffic impact is they identify what the critical peak hour of the road network is, and then they adopt a trip generation rate per child based on the size of the centre. And then that's how they extrapolate the peak hour traffic generation. And it's the peak hour traffic generation that determines the level of impact. So where the peak hour traffic generation is between 10 and 100 trips, that triggers a transport impact statement level of assessment, and it's considered to create a moderate level of impact. If it exceeds 100 trips in the peak hour, then that requires a traffic impact assessment, which is a much more detailed type of assessment. I can tell you that in the 65 plus childcare centres that I've worked on, which have each required a traffic assessment, childcare centres from 60 children up to 110 children have never triggered a TIA. It's always been a TIS based on the trip generation rates that are adopted.
Thank you. Just on the traffic, then your justification for not having a turning bay in the car park is that you have a sign which says car park full.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm delivering my child to the centre and I get there and the sign says it's full. What do I actually do then?
That's a good question. So as part of the enrolment process, the parents will be educated on how to manage that kind of scenario. As they approach the centre, they'll see that the sign is lit up, which means that all the visitor bays have been occupied. The typical turnaround time for drop-off or pick-up is 6 to 10 minutes. So they're advised to wait within the road carriageway within an appropriate position until they see a car come out of the car park. Sign switches off and then they go in and they use an appropriate parking space.
So both lanes, both sides have got cars parked there. I've got nowhere to go then. Is that correct?
Well, they wouldn't enter the car park. The sign is actually at the entrance of the car
So
park.
I'd have to go around the block again.
Well, they could find an appropriate. Sorry.
You could wait at the driveway.
They could wait in
The car comes back out.
It's a two-way driveway, so they could wait by the driveway. The idea is to prevent them from actually going into the car park if it's full.
Okay. All right. Further questions? Yes, councillor.
Thank you. My question follows on from the presiding member's question 2 questions ago, and which was itself a response to what Dr. Lugg had said in his presentation. What Dr. Lugg had said was he challenged just how practical the assumption had been that some 36%, or I guess approximately only 1/3 of the traffic generation trips would be in the peak hour. And I guess my question is, and it comes from someone whose kids are now out of childcare and entirely necessary service it is, but my experience was that you drop kids off before you go to work and then you pick them up after you've finished work. So is it really realistic to assume that only 1/3 of the trips would be in that peak hour period?
That's a good question. I think rather than focusing on the outcome, it's about focusing how you arrive at the number. There's an established trip generation rate per child. And then when you calculate it based on the number of kids in the centre, that's what the end result is. So whether it's 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5 or any other proportion, I don't think that's entirely relevant to the actual daily generation. It's actually based on the peak hour trip generation rate that has been used.
Further question?
A question to Rory Hindle. First of all, thank you for your presentation and going to meet people in the area. Trying to understand everything you said. I heard but didn't totally understand one part. I think you said you met with someone or you'd agreed that you were going to have a 2.4 metre fence in one part, perhaps the rear, I'm not sure.
On the eastern boundary there, the city had approved a 2.1, but after speaking to the residents, they had asked, could we increase the height? So we'd agreed to increase the height to further reduce that impact at our own cost.
So my question to you is, if that's the case, if that's what the neighbours want, if that's what you're willing to provide, how would that go in your, assuming your development application is approved, of course, how would that go in the development approval? Would it be by lodging new plans? Would it be a condition? How is that
Yeah,
done?
I can cover that for you. The plans already show the 2.4 metre high fence.
Okay.
So when they go through detailed design, the plans that they put forward for building permit need to be consistent with the drawings that were under the planning approval. So because the detail is shown on the drawings, it will carry through.
I'm sorry, I was looking as you spoke and I just couldn't find it, but you've answered my question.
No problem. I'm sorry, may I just go back to a couple of the questions that Ms. Hyde was asking in relation to the play structures, if I may?
Mm-hmm.
This is probably one of those scenarios where the detailed landscape plan condition is essential. There's also some conditions that require verification of noise compliance prior to occupancy. So through both of those conditions, we will make sure that any structures that are within the play area are looked at appropriately and that the noise levels are received appropriately by the neighbours as well. And I mean, Rory might be able to pipe in as well, but it's not intended to have any really high play structures or anything that's going to be outstandingly high, right? I mean, you've got small kids that go up there.
Yeah.
There's a safety component to that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything over 500 mils have to be soft floor around as well, so they're not going to be putting the children at risk, and they're not going to be able to accommodate 20 children on a large platform.
I understand that. I can only go by what I can see in front of me. So.
Understandable. That's why I thought it pertinent to answer the question again.
Any further questions? Just one more in terms of that wall, and I understand the neighbours have requested an increase in height, and that solves the acoustic issue. Sandra, what do you think the amenity would be like on the neighbour's side of the wall at 2.4 metres?
So firstly, we modified the material to masonry specifically for an improved visual. The wall can be treated in a number of ways. There's a range of different masonry treatments that can be adopted, whether that's brickwork, blockwork, or a combination. So I think visually there are ways and means to appease the neighbours if they have specific ways that they'd like to see the wall. Beyond that, we're also talking about a site that is zoned residential R30. So hypothetically, if a residential development were proposed, you'd be allowed to have boundary walls to at least 2 boundaries for a portion up to 3.5 metres. So, boundary walls are becoming more and more an acceptable component of residential and commercial house design. Obviously, we're not proposing boundary walls in this case, but walls along boundaries are walls on boundaries.
Okay. No further questions? Okay. Thank you. Well, thanks, gentlemen. We'll move to the officers now. Are there questions of the City of South Perth officers? No?
Yes,
Yes,
I did. Thank you. Mostly, again, around the commentary around the landscape plan and so forth. And I don't know if there's a bit of a misfit between what has been said and what's shown. I think the RAR talked about the retention of 7 mature trees, but I can only see 3 referenced on the landscape plan. So I'm not sure how important to the development the retention of those seven trees are, if there's something that I've missed or that the landscape plan has missed.
So the landscape plan is largely a concept plan at this stage. The 7 trees for retention, that's outlined in an arborist report, which is a separate attachment to the application. So I believe the recommended conditions refer specifically to the arborist report in terms of identifying those particular trees to be retained.
Okay. If I may, a second question. Thank you, Presiding Member. And this in no means prejudices the outcome of this this discussion moving forward, but there is obviously a shortfall of parking, which is acknowledged by all parties, and there's a desire for cash in lieu to make up for those two. And where would that money be spent? The city's parking plan indicates that it should be generally in proximity to the development, but how would you allocate that in the context of this residential street?
Thank you to the Chair. It's unlikely it would be spent within the street itself. It would actually be provided to a general account that could be utilised within the general area, but I think it's unlikely it would actually be spent in this particular street.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Further questions of your, yes, Councillor.
Sorry. My question is a follow-on from the question that I asked of the applicants, and that's just to the city. In respect of the traffic issue that was raised by Dr. Lugg in respect of the proportion of the trips that were generated that were said to occur in peak hour, being around a third in the report. Did the city, in its consideration, find that that was a reasonable estimate of the number of trips that would be generated during peak hour, and that the majority of trips would in fact be out of peak hour, given it's a childcare centre presumably, so people can go to work?
The report was reviewed by our engineering team and they did not have any concerns. They felt that it was correct. Obviously, we're not engineering experts ourselves, but basically we concur with that on the advice that we've received from our engineering team. From our own experience, I guess, with the trip generation and the peak times, you know, with these childcare centres, they don't have the same pick up and drop off as like a regular primary school or high school. So it is spread out a bit more across the day. So not all kids are being dropped off and picked up at the peak times. So I don't see why necessarily those numbers would be incorrect.
Questions? No further questions?
Yes. You've seen the photos of the street, I presume?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Love.
Dr. Love.
Dr. Love. Yeah. What time were they taken, Dr. Love? If you could just what day? Sorry?
Morning.
Morning. What time? Oh. 6, 7, 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock. Okay. Given that there seems to be a lot of on-street parking, it seems that a lot of the existing uses, houses, apartments or units, have a deficit in parking anyway. Would it not be appropriate, should the application be approved, to specify that the applicants install 2 parking bays to overcome the deficit, rather than catching it? At least you're then certain to get some parking.
The city's generally not supportive of on-street parking, and also we would need to ensure that there's appropriate traffic flow through this street. Obviously, a number of the residents have raised that as a concern. So if anything, if the traffic continues to increase, it may be a case that we need less on-street parking rather than more, to ensure that the traffic is able to flow freely.
Well, it doesn't seem to be flowing freely here. It's down to what, 3 lanes effectively, because there's 2 lanes of parking and 1 access. So it's deficient already. Did you have concerns about the volume of traffic from the childcare centre creating a further detrimental impact of parking or the traffic flow than already occurs?
No, that was not a concern that was raised by our engineering team.
Thank you.
No further questions of the officers. Thank you to the officers. We'll move on to the responsible authority report. We have a recommendation for approval before us with a number of conditions. I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for the published recommendation. Is there a mover for that?
I'll move it to have the debate on the item.
Is there a seconder? lapses for want of a seconder. I'm going to ask if there's an alternate motion. To present an alternate motion, which is very similar to that. Can we put that up, share that on the screen? Oh. Okay, do I need to read?
Just allow them just to
I'll
scroll through. Maybe just the aspects that you've edited.
Yes, I've changed the R13 alternate recommendation to elaborate on a couple of the reasons and to remove two of the reasons. So just for the benefit of those who.
Yeah, do you want to just read it out? I know it's a lot, but maybe just to make it clear to everyone in the room.
I shall read it out.
Thank you.
Refuse DAP application reference DAP 2402-688 and accompanying plans in accordance with clause 68 of Schedule 2 deemed provisions of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015 and the provisions of the City of South Perth Local Planning Scheme number 7 for the following reasons. 1. Inadequate parking provision to meet the demand generated by the childcare premises, particularly as the proposed centre is located mid-street block on a busy local street and will rely on an electronic system to manage the parking when no bay is available, potentially resulting in traffic being blocked in the street. The city's local planning policy non-residential parking recommends the provision of 21 car parking bays. 2. The car parking and manoeuvring areas do not include provision of a turnaround bay to enable forward gear exit in the event the car park is full, potentially causing congestion in the car park and in the street for vehicles waiting to enter. The city's local planning policy, non-residential parking, recommends all driveways be designed to allow vehicles to enter the street in forward gear. 3, the proposal does not include provision of a dedicated service loading bay resulting in reliance on the limited car parking bays provided. The city's local planning policy, non-residential parking, recommends provision of a dedicated service loading bay for commercial land uses. 4, the proposed hours of operation commencing from 6:30 a.m. is considered to result in an undue impact on nearby residential properties and would be inconsistent with the expected level of amenity for a residential zone. The city's local planning policy, childcare premises, recommends hours of operation between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 5, the proposed waste management plan resulting in on-site waste collection 4 times a week between the hours of 6:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. is considered to unduly impact on the amenity of adjoining residential properties. This is considered relevant to the objectives of the residential zone and clause 67(2)(n) of the deemed provisions. 6, the proposed landscape plan lacks detail to clearly demonstrate how the children's play areas will be designed, including any raised play structures, to minimise noise impacts and avoid encroaching on privacy of residential or neighbouring properties. This is considered relevant to the objectives of residential zone and clause 67(2)(n) of the deemed provisions. And finally, 7, the proposal is not considered to satisfy the deemed to comply requirements or demonstrate compliance with the design principles relating to solar access for adjoining sites, element 3.9 of our codes volume 1 part C, which is likely to cause additional amenity impacts on the adjoining neighbour. I'm seeking a seconder for that. Yes, Councillor Ward, thank you. As the mover, I will speak. We've heard a lot over the last 2 meetings, and I don't necessarily agree with every concern that the residents have raised. There are some there you'll notice I've left out of my recommendation. But I do agree that there is an issue. I do, like, having been there, I can see that there are going to be some practical issues around getting access in and out of this place. The street capacity may well satisfy the technical buffs in terms of how many cars the street can technically take. But in all practical senses, I just don't think it's going to work. And that will cause impacts up and down the street. I think some of the other issues are around the operating of the centre, the hours of operation. And I know that could be managed through a condition of approval, but these are the hours that they have requested. And I think there are noise and amenity issues for neighbours. So I do accept some of those concerns. So for those reasons, I encourage my fellow panel members to support this refusal. Councillor Ward, a seconder.
Yes, thank you. My reasons are largely related to the draft position statement issued by the WAPC, which is what I've reviewed this assessment against. And firstly, I note that clause 4 of the draft position statement outlines the policy objectives, emphasising the need to locate childcare premises where they are, and I quote, compatible with and complementary to residential land use and road network. So this objective seeks to prevent development that in its form, character, scale and substance are inconsistent with the surrounding land uses. So in that note, it's important to note that the draft position statement uses the term complementary, meaning development must enhance and contribute positively to the residential land use and to the surrounding road network. Secondly, the draft position statement objective also states to ensure childcare premises do not have a detrimental impact on the amenity of the adjoining residents and the locality. So in my view, this directive extends beyond making the impacts acceptable, but actually requires the development to actively complement the residential land use, and any impact on the amenity ought to be absent as much as possible. Moving on from there is talking about amenity. Clause 5.5 of the draft position statement specifies undesirable characteristics for childcare premises, and it states, and I'm just going to note 3 of them. Childcare premises are not suitable where, in the opinion of the decision maker, the first one, the size and dimension of the site is inadequate to accommodate the development and accordingly likely to adversely affect the amenity of the locality. The second point is the amenity of the adjoining and nearby properties would be adversely affected by noise, traffic movement and insufficient parking and pedestrian safety. And the third point is that access is from a local street which may impact upon the amenity of the area due to the high peak hour traffic volumes. So today we've heard from quite a number of residents as to their concerns. We've seen the petition that has been provided to us, and that should also be factored into our decision. And we can see that the impacts from noise, traffic movement and insufficient parking are evident in this quiet residential street. So in my view, the proposal is not consistent with the WAPC draft position statement. The position paper continues to state that current access being from local streets, which may impact the amenity due to the high peak traffic volumes. And I don't feel that the traffic study has properly taken this into consideration, and that the residents are best positioned to assess the traffic safety and the impacts based on their daily experiences. As far as noise goes, we've heard 2 neighbours say that their bedrooms are adjacent to the boundary fence of the proposed development. And to address the noise, the acoustic consultant recommends increasing the height of fences to 2.1 metres, and I've also heard now the neighbours have requested 2.4. I also note that the local planning policy relating to childcare premises refers to fences saying that they shall not exceed a height of 1.8 metres above natural ground level and visually permeable at 1.2. Now, I do note that that clause applies to front fences, and I also note that Schedule 2 of the fencing local law requires boundary fences not to exceed 1.8 metres. However, in order to ameliorate the noise issues, a wall must be constructed, and the suggested 2.1 metre high around the entirety of the premises, including the street frontage. The responsible authority seems to acknowledge the impact that this will have on the amenity and proposes to reduce the height of the solid wall at the front to 1.2 metres and then a permeable wall for the remainder. However, I do not think that this will adequately cater for the impact of the noise, in addition to the construction of walls around the entirety of the premises. Above that, which is required for an ordinary boundary fence and fronting the street, introduces a development of a scale and bulk that then unacceptably impacts upon the amenity of the area, resulting in a development that is not compatible with the residential expectation. Then we come to the issue of car parking. So reducing parking spaces in this proposal could impact street safety, especially on the local roads that already experience traffic challenges during peak time. I note that clause 5.6 of the draft position statement states that parking for childcare premises in residential areas, when visible from the street, should complement the residential streetscape. This proposal, however, both removes a parking bay and introduces extensive street front parking, which neither contributes to nor complements the residential character. Scale and intensity. So the core problem with this proposal, in my view, is the scale and the intensity of the use, maximising the site for a childcare centre whilst disregarding the amenity impacts or assuming that they can be sufficiently mitigated. The traffic impact analysis presented does not convincingly support the proposed intensification of use to a scale incompatible with a residential area. The assumptions in the traffic study do not provide a sufficient assurance that there will be no significant impact on the road network, particularly when we've heard that the road is already used as a rat run. So consequently, the proposal falls short of justifying the proposed traffic impact analysis. And clause 5.8 of the draft position statement regarding noise and emission impact provides that the proponent should minimise any noise impact of the childcare premises on adjacent residential properties to a level acceptable to the decision maker. So this implies that the noise level must be satisfactory and mere compliance with the noise regulations is insufficient. And I understand this because noise sensitive premises are integral to a residential area, which encompasses all of the surrounding properties. Residents clearly do not want to be impacted by noise as they have expressed, and this concern extends to the use of their outdoor areas and even their bedrooms located only 1.5 metres from the rear boundary, presumably positioned there for the very purpose that it's supposed to be a quieter location than the front of the house. The draft position statement highlights the physical separation as the primary means of reducing the noise emission impacts, followed by design and layout considerations, with acoustic treatments as the last line of defence. This means that the loft must be large enough to provide adequate separation between noise generating areas and noise sensitive premises. And in my view, the criteria outlined in the position statement does not support this development proposal simply with fencing as a noise mitigation measure. So in all of the circumstances, this proposed development positioned between two other residential lots and featuring the intensity and nature of the use described amounts, in my view, to a development inconsistent with residential amenity and likely to generate unacceptable levels of noise, bulk and scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall. Further speakers?
Thank you.
Yes,
Does that remember? I'm happy to support the refusal. This land use in this location requires the application of discretion, and in that context, I've got concerns that the development has direct and indirect impact on adjoining properties and the immediate neighbourhood. Also think it's important to note that any approval would run with the land and it's not associated with one particular operator. So, you know, in my consideration, I must look at this development on its merits alone and not any informal undertakings by Tall Tree Early Learning, who I'm sure, you know, have the right meaning, but this is about this use specifically in this location. One of my main concerns is about the traffic and parking generated and how that will be managed in the mid-block location with a sloping site access. There hasn't been a recent traffic count to justify the traffic analysis, and the only way for a full complement of parking on the site would be to, and without impacting neighbours with random street parking, would be to lose trees or open space or pay cash in lieu. And we've heard that even with cash in lieu, it cannot be looked to provide any on-street parking to alleviate the shortfall. So It's also uncertain if the car vehicles will have adequate room to manoeuvre when in the car park, and able to leave in forward gear. And being familiar with the street and the site, I feel that could create a risk for both vehicles and pedestrians. I'm also concerned by the noise impacts, which under the current studies conducted indicate that noise can only be mitigated by limiting children in the outdoor areas or by raising wall heights, and raising wall heights has knock-on effects in terms of overshadowing. The landscape plan seems unclear as to how it works with the noise considerations, and I note at the moment that what's before us has a proliferation of active and elevated play areas, including play within the surrounding landscape buffer. There are a number of other impacts which I regard to be of a more minor nature, but there is a cumulative effect about the siting and the scale of this particular built form. And whilst the applicant believes, and to some extent the local government believes, that any impacts can be conditioned and addressed and therefore made acceptable, I'm afraid I disagree. So I don't find that the proposal is consistent with the local policy for childcare. The site is not level. It is constrained by a sewer easement, which limits the site planning and the landscape. The proposal does not minimise the impact on amenity of existing residential development. Outdoor play is not located away from adjoining noise-sensitive premises, and the supporting acoustic report does not take into account a number of potential noise factors. All the required parking is not provided on site. Waste storage is also adjacent to boundary, which is shared with a residential property, and the development cannot be serviced during normal operating hours, all requirements of the local planning policy. So for those reasons, I am unable to support an approval, and I support the motion to refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay. Further speakers?
Yes, presiding member, in moving the motion to approve, I did say that it was to engender discussion. We've had that discussion, and I too am not supporting the proposal. I think that looking at the plans and the submissions made and the lack of supporting information to justify the development, I think it's an overdevelopment of the site. And that's shown because the bulk and scale of the building has impacts onto the adjoining properties in terms of overshadowing. It has, and the use itself has amenity impacts such as noise, overshadowing, and the joint or the draft position statement on childcare premises. I think it fails to address a number of the objectives and the characteristics for childcare premises. In fact, it exhibits undesirable characteristics for childcare premises, including the amenity and of the adjoining and nearby premises, properties, being adversely affected by noise, traffic movement, insufficient parking, and pedestrian safety. I think the size of the centre is too large for the site, given the constrained nature, as Karen mentioned, the easement, the sewer easement. I think if a number of the number of children in the childcare premises were reduced, and I think it'd have to be significant. A number of the concerns that have been risen in terms of parking, access, the use of an electronic sign and so forth would fall away. But in terms of the locational characteristics of the use, access is proposed from a major road. That road has got significant traffic volumes. We have photos showing problems on the road already, and I know it's not this premise that's likely that has caused that. It will in turn exacerbate it, but not a big amount, but it will create there are already dangerous situations there. And I think that parents dropping kids off early morning and picking them up late afternoon don't exhibit the characteristics of orderly motorists at times. They're hassled, they're getting to work or they're coming home from work and picking up kids, and they're rushing backwards and forwards and unlikely to, in a lot of instances, park on site. And even if they would have to manoeuvre in and out of a busy street. So all in all, I don't think it's an appropriate land use for the site, especially being mid-block. And I think that that's something that has to be addressed in future applications of a similar nature. So I won't be supporting the proposal.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Crickle.
Thank you, presiding member. I would say that I agree with everything the previous speakers have said, with one exception, and that's my fellow councillor, Councillor Waugh, who said that we should also consider the petition or words to that effect. I haven't, and the reason I haven't is because this is not a popularity contest. If everyone in the area didn't like it and it was a very good application, then I think we would be bound to approve it. The presenters today have been of very good quality in their presentations, and I have read everything that you have provided, and I've listened to everything that you've said, and it's the reasons why you either say it should be supported or opposed that I've taken into account, not that there is more on one side of the room than the other. Like the previous speaker, I think this is a significant overdevelopment of this particular site because of its location in the middle of a block in a residential area on a street which has very constrained parking and has traffic problems already. I live around 500 metres to the north in Thelma Street, and I avoid your street, Park Street residents, not because I dislike you, but because it's not a rat run. And I reject that part of one of the presentations because Canning Highway is a lot quicker. Park Street is a difficult street because of the cars parked in it, and you've got a zigzag in the mornings when I'm doing school drop-off or going to work. And I couldn't think of anything worse than doing that when there are more cars there. The shortage of on-street parking in this particular application would make that worse. I think if you were going to put in a development in a location very constrained or with significant parking problems already, then you need to comply with the policies in respect of on-street parking. This one doesn't. And again, like the previous speaker, if the development had been smaller, then perhaps some of the other amenity impacts could have been taken in balance, and the discretion perhaps could have been exercised differently. But I don't think it's a difficult decision given how significant or substantial the size of this development is in this particular location and its likely impact on the people who live in the area. I had some other notes as well. Certainly, the money that the city had suggested by way of a condition for payment in lieu for the parking shortfall may well be good for the city's coffers, but it will, well, not really, it's not that much, but it would not assist the people in this area deal with the parking problems. This is in no way an adverse comment about childcare as an essential service. It allows people to work and to do the other things that they need to in their life, and We need to provide for it as the city increases in size. And we've seen a number of applicants recently provide childcare centres presumably for that purpose. So it's not an objection to childcare, but just the overwhelmingly substantial size of this development here in its location and its impacts on the people who use the street, who live in the area, is why I can't support it and why I support the alternative motion moved by the presiding member and my fellow councillor. To the speakers today, well done. Tatsuya, you might have been very nervous, but your public speaking was very good. And because I've said that your petition was not important to my decision making, it's not a reflection on your public speaking, can I say. Thank you all for having sufficient interest in your area to make a presentation, and thank you to the applicant for sincerely making efforts to meet with them and deal with their issues. But unfortunately, I can't support your application.
Thank you, Councillor Crickland. I don't think I need to say anything in terms of rebuttal or wrapping up the debate. I think it's fairly clear. So I'm now going to put the motion to refuse as read out earlier on. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Just moving on. There are no two staff applications, no SAT 30 or Section 31 reconsiderations. There's some other business listed there in terms of SAT matters, and I'll close the meeting at 2:27. And thank you everybody for your attendance. Thank you.